start, we want to thank the organizations. The first one is FAMDEGUA,
La integración de madres, hijas, hijos, hermanas.
who was born in 92,
Durante el conflicto armado interno, en un clima de impunidad.
Who was created in 1992, integrated by several relatives of people who were detained, disappeared during the internal conflict. It's a non-governmental humanitarian and solidarity organization of social, cultural, and educational service with legal status, which directs its work to search for victims of forced disappearance during the internal armed conflict, denounce the violation of the fundamental rights and freedoms of any person or community, promote exhumations, identifications, and burial processes for the dignification of victims, accompaniment of legal processes with the relatives of the victims of forced disappearance, socialized life experience with other relatives and society. This celebration is part of one of the activities that FAMDEGUA have interactivities to honor the anniversary. Please follow FAMDEGUA activities through social networks, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can also send us an email to ask for more information. We also wanna thank you SOAW Watch, the School of American Watch, the Interfaith Committee on Latin America, Guatemala Human Rights Commission, the Guatemalan Collectivity in Los Angeles, and Guatemala LA Women in Resistance. We invite you to follow them on social media, and we will be sharing more information in the chat. So we are sharing all the information of the organizations in the chat. Thank you again for all the sponsors.
Y bueno, a continuación queremos presentar un pequeño.
So now we want to present a tribute video for women and men founders and base of FAMDEGUA. While we listen to the names of the people who we are commemorating today.
Blanca Rosa Quiroga López.
Marcia Mertes Calderón. Aurelena Farfal. Esther Hernández Castillo, Genera López. Berta Lilia Martínez Vivas. Irma Yolanda Mendoza Rangel. María Yolanda Ramos. Aurelena Sushini Farfán. Victoria Tubin Sots, Sonia Serrano Hernández. Estela Emiliana Miranda Ramírez. María Elena Bustamante. María Ofelia Salanic Chiquil. Sandra Ofelia Gómez Hernández. Yolanda Mendoza Rangel. Manuel Salanic Tuc, Erlindo Ichoquino. Miguel Ángel Alvesures Pedrosa. Sergio Castro, Héctor López Hernández, Héctor Efraín López Zárate, Otto Abner Villanueva, Francisco Sánchez, Raúl Gómez Hernández, Myron Hood, and a lot of more who have been walking in FAMDEGUA these 30 years.
Bueno, a continuación tenemos el gusto de presentar a Rebeca Zúñiga, quien nos va a compartir.
Right now we have the honor to present Rebecca Zúñiga, who's going to give us a historical context about the United States, the role of the United States in the internal armed conflict. Rebecca is currently the
part
director of the
committee,
Gender
the SOAW Watch
Youth
Committee,
and Justice Committee, and is
she's
also
part of the
supports
East
the
Committee of
AFSC committee
Friends of
and
Guatemala.
from Nicaragua, and is an
She
expert
lived in
on
Guatemala
Nicaragua
in the
and
60s
Guatemala
and the
from the
70s.
80s and
Thank you,
90s.
Rebecca.
Thank you so much
and
for being
we
here.
give you the word.
Hi, everyone.
Good afternoon, everyone.
I'm here from the
Here in
Yuchayan territory.
Arabajo.
And as they've said, I'm Rebecca
My
Zuniga, and I use she, her pronouns.
are she and her. This afternoon,
And so this
I'm
afternoon,
gonna share
I'm going to be focused on the responsibility of the United States government
of the
in the internal
U.S.
armed
in the
conflict
armed
of Guatemala, and
and
especially in
the case of the
military
military
diary case. The United States is a co-responsible
of the
member
atrocities
for the
committed
atrocities that occurred in Guatemala,
Guatemalan state in the
especially in the
military
case
diary
of the
case,
military diary.
and that removed to the
In
coup
1970, in
against the
1954, the
president
CIA
who
pushed
was
forward a
elected
coup that took out President Jacobo
and
Arbenz, who was
whose
democratically elected
government
and
was
who had pushed for
promoting
social reforms
an
and
agrarian
agricultural reforms. And this
This agrarian
agricultural reform
affected
impacted
negatively
U.S.
the United
corporations
States
like the United Fruit Company.
companies like the
The coup
United
carried
Fruit
out by the
Company.
CIA installed a military dictatorship
coup
that
of
was
the
supported by the United States, and
gave
it began
a
decades
military
of violence,
strategy
brutal
and
violence against the people of Guatemala.
violence started.
I think the interpreters are I'll continue. So as I was saying, the responsibility of the United States installing governments in Guatemala intensified the training of the police and the military, especially in the 1960s. These trainings included the School of the Americas, and which was training the which was a military training school run by the United States at that time, based in Panama. And it trained the military and counterinsurgency activities in Guatemala. And the military training by the United States brought the doctrine of the internal enemy, and it taught techniques of torture and counterinsurgency techniques. Also techniques that military and police in Guatemala put in place when they participated in forced disappearances, torture, and executions. All of this is documented by the case of the military diary. And so the CIA and the State Department of the United States closely followed the persecution of political opposition carried out by the police and military of Guatemala. They followed up on massacres, forced disappearances, extrajudicial executions. And so it's clear that the United States supported the brutality. They were aware of the brutality. And in 1966, the Vice Minister of Defense of Guatemala literally asked for the help of the United States for the training of the specialized death squads that were in charge of kidnapping and forced disappearances. And so their goal was to eliminate social leaders. And so at the end of the Carter administration, cut the direct support for security support for Guatemala, but millions of dollars continued flowing to the military of Guatemala, including technology and training equipment for the military. And so the recognition of the atrocities in Guatemala by the Carter administration, it was not effective in stopping the United States support for the military. And then it was reverted very quickly by the Ronald Reagan administration, who renewed the support, intensive support for the military regiments of Guatemala, including the support of the CIA, which was promoting the Guatemalan government and lied about the situation of human rights at that. Reagan named Henry Kissinger, a war criminal, as the president of his commission on Central America, who traveled to Guatemala in 1983 in December, and who met with President Mejia Victores and gave him much support to his regimen. Kissinger claimed that there were not problems with human rights, that they were just internal questions that the country should resolve on their own. And so the United States is responsible for these forced disappearances and other crimes that are outlined in the military diary case. For example, in February of 1984, the US Embassy in Guatemala describes 2 of the kidnappings that occurred in the military diary that had recently occurred. Sergio Benicio Semayo Morales and Jorge Mauricio de Paz, which occurred at a shopping center. The cable from the US Embassy to the United States affirms that, these new and impactful disappearances show that the security forces of the Guatemalan government will always attack when there's an important goal or objective. So we can look at these, this history, and we can look at this as a strategic moment, or we can follow the higher moral route. That's a literal quote from the US Embassy. And so it's clear that the United States decides that they should continue ignoring the forced disappearances and continue financing those very forced disappearances. So at least one of the military members who has been brought to trial, Colonel Jacobo Salan Sanchez. He was trained twice in the School of the Americas. In 1974, he was trained in combat and support for the Caibil Special Forces. And during that time, he was accused of the case of the military diary case. And then he went back to the SOA School of the Americas for additional training after. So with this very short historical summary, many of the people who are here at present know much more detail about the history, but we just wanted to give a short, brief context. And so with that, it's clear the role that the United States government has had, and that it should be responsible and brought to justice in the military diary case and in many other cases. From SOA Watch and from the Committee of Justice and Peace of Denver, we are in solidarity with the people of Guatemala who are searching for justice through the case, the military diary case. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for that very concrete and helpful introduction that synthesizes so many years of history. Next, we'll be hearing from Julita Tul and Carmen Gomez, who is a well-known Maya Quiche lawyer with a long experience working for the rights of Indigenous women. And she's currently supporting the human rights. She's currently supporting several cases of human rights, including the military diary case. And since 1980, from 1982 to 1983. And so her uncle was forcibly disappeared. And so at this moment, we're going to be asking some questions so that we can hear updated information about the military diary case. And also some hope from what family members are hoping to achieve through this case. So we'll start with you, Senora Uvita, and then we wanted to ask you, where is the military diary case at this moment, and what moment in the process is it? And could you tell us a little bit about the different actors in the case? Of course. And also, if you want to give any additional information and updates this time. So go ahead. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. So before I get started, I wanted to send a message of solidarity and fraternal solidarity to all the people who have been victims of forced disappearance in Guatemala and any other place in the world. I think with these commemorations, we are once again remembering the difficulty and the continual and permanent effects of a crime like forced disappearances. Those who are being tried in the military diary case. And so I just want to share about the current state in this process. There's different nuances, but I want to be very concrete and present you with some processional scenarios as far as where the process is right now. And then we can continue talking about the challenges that we've had at this time. Currently, in the military diary case, there are 9 people who were sent to trial, a public trial, for the crimes of forced disappearance, crimes against humanity, and in concrete cases of some other types of crimes like murder and other concrete actions. These people are waiting because the oral debate will start at any time. And first, moving through the stage where all parties, including victims and the accused, have the opportunity to offer their evidence that could be useful in the public debate before the trial begins. But there are also 5 other people who are currently waiting for the commemoration of what in Guatemala is known as the intermediary trial. And that's to say that these people are going to be or not be brought to a public trial. So those 5 people are currently, they've been brought to process. That's start the process for the crimes of forced disappearance and crimes against humanity. But they're waiting the hearing to understand the juridical context of situation of these people. And then with this process, there are several incidences that have to do with appeals, recusals, and other actions that have come out of the process. And so given that, the moving forward of the case of the military diary case in Guatemala, this means something very important for victims' justice in Guatemala. And the importance of these steps shows us the ways that the accused have responded inside the process, as part of the process. So that includes actions of malevolent actions within the legal process. And so this is a very important situation in the process. One of the important things has been the situation of health for the accused. Many of them are elderly. And so because of situations of health, we've had to wait weeks and months so that the case could move forward. And this, from the victims or plaintiffs' perspective, they've always said that the right to health should be guaranteed and at every moment, even when they're accused, as long as we take into account that the 183 victims that are registered in the military diary and the 45 people who are forcibly disappeared never had the right to access healthcare, never had the right to a trial, never had the right to be heard, and before a judge. And so despite that, the plaintiffs, the victims, have emphasized that these rights should be respected and guaranteed for the accused, especially the right of health. And I just wanted to emphasize that because this has been a situation that has been present throughout the process. And so in that sense, in the next stages of the trial, this is going to be an important factor that will be present. But just speaking generally, this is the current state of the military diary process.
Thank you so much, Jovita. Carmen, we would like to hear from you around the demands, the ask of the plaintiffs, and what are the hopes that you all have? And any other information that you consider important. And thank you so much for being here today. Thank you so much. Good afternoon. It's an honor to be here and share with you this experience of life that is still now moves me around a lot to talk about even, but I know it's important and it's necessary that people knows what happened. In that sense, I wanted to say that the denounces, the first demands, the primary demands, in my case as a survivor, and also as someone who knows people in the military diary, friends, family, I want to use this moment to recognize, to thank those women who are in the military diary, those sisters, those siblings that were sisters of pain. And they're present today, their energies are present today because their energies were working to transform this country to do good things. And they transmitted these energies to us. And that's what motivates us to continue. So primary, the demand is that we want to know the truth, the right to the truth. And that truth can follow us to the processes that are happening. It's not good that we hide all this information. We want that organizations, corporations, military organizations stop functioning in our country. And we ask to stop hiding information. If they don't guarantee that we know the truth, this is going to happen again. So the principle of no repetition, we want the people know all the truth, so other generations don't have to pass for the same things that we had to leave. We asked that the state actually function as it should function, as the Constitution talks, because we know that there is a corruption there. There is a regression, anti-democratic regression that is affecting us a lot. And those are the main demands that we have. We are not asking, we're demanding. And from my input, those are the demands. I also consider it's important to mention to stop criminalizing, persecuting, criminalizing the people who are working in this. I've been feeling that people are following me and I feel attacked. When they kidnapped me, it was 2 blocks from here. They know me. They follow me for a lot of years. They ask me for a lot of information. They have come here. Groups have come here. So we live under persecution. And we live in a state of scarcity. So we want that to stop so we can continue with the processes, with the legal processes. Thank you. Thank you for your words, for your testimony, for your analysis. The next part of questions want to address how this affects us, particularly and women, make visible the gender violence that had in the case of the military diary, and how Carmen was saying, we're talking about people who were working for the right of the community. So we want to talk specifically about women during the armed conflict. And Jovita, if you want to talk a little bit more about that. Yes, for sure. This is a topic very fundamental, I believe, in this policy of counterinsurgency, of repression, of persecution in the time of intern armed conflict. I want to talk about some circumstances that we try to evidence in the hearings, in the intermediate hearings, where we show some patterns on how this violence found in the body of women a mechanism, a useful mechanism to promote scarcity, to scare people. This is not a secret. In during history in wars of all the territories, they have used the body, the lives of women as a tool of war. In the case of Guatemala, it wasn't the exception, but it was part of the actions, of the strategies that they implemented to break the organized fight, the organized resistance that we had in that time. Since the collectives, the grassroots organizations, and that existed in that time, we always in the hearings have been talking about that right of the victims of the military diary to say that they were actually working against a regime, that they weren't agreeing in a government that was using violence, repression, that we were living in that time. So it's from there that the victims are saying that thinking different is not a crime. If there was a situation that in that time was actually a crime, why they didn't have any processes, legal processes for all the violence? In the case of women, those circumstances were very, very strong and direct because it was an affectation in two senses. And what I say this, because in the video that we saw at the beginning of this space, we saw the founders of the organization, and we saw a lot of women that they were looking for their children, for their husbands, their partners of life, their brothers, their fathers, their mothers. So since there is an affectation in women, those are the pluri-effects that actually affect the victim, but all the family, especially the mothers, the sisters, the wives, the daughters. And in the other side, when these actions are directly against women, we also had these patterns in the treatment of women, the use of their body, the sexual violence, inhuman treatment directed specifically against women, using their sons and daughters as part of this psychological torture that they were using. In the case of women, have to work as a servants for them. They were using the women to work forcibly, and also to sexual violence, and it was very common. I always say this in the intermediary hearing. I wasn't living in that time for the time that this was happening, but I believe that if we have a state policy that was happening at that time, and that was the policy and the politics that were organizing and govern our country, of course, this was a very, very violent policy and policies. And it's just violence, like openly violent against the body of women from what we have seen and heard. We know women that were in the time putting their bodies, their lives to defend human rights, social rights, for a better country in this territory, that they had to face those situations. So they are very, very bad situations, especially when we're talking about women. They were denigrating them as humans, but also as women, as mother, our sister, and all the faces that women have in this society. I could talk forever for this, but I think that's in summary those affectations that women had in that time, but that also are happening now. And that's why we keep talking about the consequences of forced disappearances, because today our conflicts, we're all waiting, hoping for justice. And we as women are waiting for it. We want justice. And we hope that we and they can find their relatives. Where are they? Because they have been waiting for so long, and that represents affectations in the actual life of women. Thank you so much, Rita. Carmen, if you want to tell us how it has been, your testimony as a mother, as daughter, as sister, from your experience, what is your perspective about this?
These experiences have been, to start with, very painful, necessary. It's implicated several generations, because some of the situations that have been mentioned, in this case, we are the women who appear in those photos. You might be using a pseudonym or their name. Their decision to participate politically and to do something to change this country. But there's other thousands who don't show up in the military diary, but they went through all the same things as the women who appear in the military diary. And then there's other women around them, those women, their mothers, their daughters, and men, their husbands, their fathers. And the disappearance of these women broke that fabric. And then also made it so that we had to pick up the fight as we search for those women. And so this has implicated now many people who have people who are just family members who are disappeared, or women who have been disappeared. They've gotten sick from the anguish, the pain, the breaking apart of families because of everything that happened and the trauma. And this continues happening because within these ruptures, women have also had to continue forward, walking forward. The role of women as caretakers in many cases became even larger, and they had to assume new responsibilities and family members because, for example, their mother was disappeared. And so these situations have made it so that women, the struggle of women has been very complex. And now that we're seeing everything that's happening in the country, even after so many years, it's still not clear what the path forward is. At the moment, we're seeing that at one moment we see things are moving forward and then the process gets stuck. And so all of us who are part of this search There's no certainty. The families aren't certain that they're not going to experience again the repression, the violence that they felt in the past. So this is a search for our family members. It's full of love. It's motivated by love, by the family, our love of our ancestors. This is a struggle full of love, but it's also not free of problems, the economic problems and many other conditional problems that make this struggle that much harder. And so within that, we can also see that many of the goals of torturing women, hiding them in clandestine jails, violence, gender-based violence against women, trying to annul women as political subjects. But that's why through the search for these disappeared women, they've become political agents because despite the fear, despite all of the things that would keep us moving backwards, we're going to keep walking against the current because we're convinced that a disappeared person, we aren't complete as a family, as a person, as a country, as municipalities, until we find those people. And between all of the difficulties, the psychological difficulties, and the many other problems that this brings us, we are all experiencing a lot of emotional and psychological problems. Some of us have received treatment, others have not. But despite that, we have to keep moving forward because this is a fight for justice. And this is a just demand that these acts be resolved, that they be resolved with justice, and that sentences are followed through on. If people are found guilty, they should pay because that's why we have legal processes. That's why we have a judicial organism that should act. And within all of that, especially at this moment, the struggle is marked by the lack of clarity in the Supreme Court. And we see the interference of a lot of other actors in the legal system right now. Thank you. Thank you so much. Last, before we go to the questions and answer, we want to give a space for the reflections that you all have ahorita about the importance of the militancy, the political participation, and the right of women who are shown in the military diary. So we want to hear some final thoughts on this topic, the agency of women, and then we'll move to La Señora Carmen. So Señora Carmen first. Yes, these events are so important because this type of events are very important because it allows for people to understand what happened in the past. I think that everything that was done against us women, a lot of it, the goal of it was to push women back into the private sphere. And they didn't pardon us for moving into the public sphere. They wanted to push us back into the private sphere. And that's why everything happened to us. And now we see so many men and women, young men and women, with everything that's happening at this time in Guatemala. And we can see the objectives of the fight that the women that appear in the military diary is being carried forward. It has to change. There's no process there's no way they will stop us. As much as they take over the state or co-opt the government, they're not going to be able to stop us. Thank you so much. And now for Jovita, would you like to share some reflections? Yes, thank you. I want to agree with what Carmen said. I think that the struggle of women have been present in all of the stages of our history. Today, they're very present in the reivindication and search for justice, especially in this case, the military diary. And as you see us here, women are also in their energy and their cosmology, they're bringing all of these women are bringing who have been reivindicating and fighting for a dignified life for all of the people now and this time. The fight for territory, the fight for health, the fight for life, the fight for education. In this country, those who are reivindicating these rights, the rights at that time, these are still struggles that matter today. And the fact that they are still relevant to today means that those struggles, that work that they did from that time until now has had very strong repercussions in these new generations, in younger generations. And I always say it hurts us to know that these things happened in our country, but by knowing the truth, by knowing what happened, we can organize ourselves and rethink how we involve ourselves in these struggles to push these struggles forward, to push forward the legacy of our memory, collective memory, and the reivindication of justice in this country. So I think that we reivindicate the memory of the victims of forced disappearance, but we also continue forward for fighting for justice in this country. So these are the things that are so important in this process. I think particularly that I've been reflecting on this, how we can continue supporting or justice or defending the indigenous territories, fighting for water, all the different circumstances that we have struggled for in this country. I think a big part of that, these continual aggressions and violence against the people, but there has always been a continual resistance in the struggle, and we have to keep moving that forward. That's what keeps alive love, hope of the families and survivors in this process. Thank you so much for your words, both of you. And before we move to the space for questions and answers, I'm going to read aloud one of the comments that says, they were friends, they were daughters, they were sisters, mothers, students, and they were leaders full of love and courage, and we miss them. We will not forget them. Now there will be a space for questions and answers, and we're planning for about 15 minutes. And there's a question from Claire that asks if the military diaries are able to be accessed and if it's in English. And sorry that we don't have this ready yet, but we will send it to you afterwards. I'll read another commentary from Facebook. The trajectory of these women as militants and collaborators is also very important to recognize that they were political agents. And maybe a first question to get started. and it can be for either one of you. What parallels do you find between the context of the 80s and the current context of democracy in Guatemala? I don't know if either one of you would like to start. I can start. It seems to me that
It is very similar. And the same that now they arrest people for protesting. And that was exactly what happened there and now. By then and now. So we see that happening now. The person who is actually trying to do the right thing or to come back to the right thing were arrested and now are arrested. So the same thing is with the persecution in the day life. A lot of armed people in regular cars, and all those practices are from the past, but we see it now. To be selective with the people that they are arresting, for example. In that time, for example, we didn't have social media. There are paramilitary organizations in that time. They posted in the newsletters the people that they were about to kill. And now we can see all those things in a like lower profile, but it keeps happening. In that time, the violation of workers' rights, the persecution of unions, and that's happening right now too. We know the violation of workers, of human rights for workers is very bad. So now they just not attack the person, but the unions. So there is a lot of parallels from the past and the present, and we are just coming back to the same things that were happening before. And again, we saw a lot of violence against women, and now we see that happening. So that's what I can mention right now. I think those parallels that Carmen mentioned are totally present in the current times. We call that in different ways. We talk about criminalization of protesting, criminalization of social leaders, the violation of independent. But if we analyze that, the objectives that they have are the same that they had in the time of internal conflict. So it is the amplification of that counterinsurgency strategy that they are doing, but with other media, with other ways. In that time, they didn't have social media, but they did a lot of campaigns all this discourse of hate and all these aggressions against human rights defenders, plaintiffs. It's a context that we live before, according to what we read, according of what we heard. But if we compare that with the current times, we're exactly in the same circumstances. And unfortunately, we fall again in the same situation that these situations are happening with the government, with the support of the government. So it is the same aggressions and it's just a continuation. And they are just transforming the ways according to the context and the needs. But we're really worried that the actual actions that they did before are going to happen again. And we're already seeing it. This is not a secret anymore. How they are killing human rights defenders, indigenous leaders, social leaders, all those actions are very present right now. Of course, to defend political interest, economic interest, and other circumstances around the territory, but are happening in the same circumstances that we live in the internal armed conflict. And that's alive today. Thank you so much. We have another question. Understanding the role of the U.S. in the internal armed conflict of Guatemala, what are your recommendations for the U.S., how U.S. citizens can support this case? And it's an open question for Jovita or for Carmen. I think Rebecca, our contract Rebecca, gave us a huge context of the role of the U.S. in those times. I don't want to say that this role has changed. Again, as the things that we see now is the same role. So, but we see now organizations, human rights organizations that are supporting us in the U.S. And it is important to support the accompaniment of the victims, the plaintiffs, not just for this case, because the fight for justice, for the crimes of the internal armed conflict in Guatemala contain a lot of fights. The military diary is just one of those things in that path. We know there are a lot more. We know we have women from the indigenous women, the genocide of the Shield people, forced disappearances, things that are actually in process, legal processes. So I ask for the support, the accompaniment to guarantee the justice in the for justice, so we can continue with the processes with justice with all the parts. We ask for respect for the independence and the integrity of the plaintiffs, the victims, and the people working in these processes. Because just with that, we are gonna assure justice. Just with that, we're gonna know what actually happened. And primary, to know where they are. Carmen, do you want to say something about that question? I want to say that since the US government, it's a little hard that they can support because of the history that we already have about the US government. But I have confidence in the people that they are different from the government and they can act different. So one of the actions that they can do from the US government is to educate people, to let people know about what happened. Just to let know people what really happened here in Guatemala and what is happening currently. All those investigations, documents, so a lot more people can know more about this, because we know the relationship of the US is close. It is from the 60s, 80s, it was very evident of the relationships with the US. And I know it is happening right now. So to support organizations, grassroots organizations in Guatemala, supporting from the US. So US citizens can actually support with projects, with resources, solidarity activities with Guatemala openly. Since the US, I think we can do that a lot. Thank you so much. And a last question. Women survivors from the military diary have suffered persecution since Miguel Angel Arvales sent to arrest 9 militaries people. Honestly, since this is very complex, I cannot talk from other people because we're all different. So this is just from my position. So I'm just talking from my position because I really clarified that I don't want to put in evidence other people, right? So yes, I've been having people following me and it is really openly, it's in your face. They don't care to show that they are actually looking for you. And it is a very complicated situation because we live all the time worried. My mother, for example, she lives with intensity all the time about this. For example, in simple situations, when I went out to the store and I took a little bit more time, and my sister went out to look for me. It was raining, so it took me a little bit more, but all my family was really worried. And that's how we live. So some of these events happened on June 29. So the day I was kidnapped was on August 10, and is the San Lorenzo Day, which is the neighborhood where I live. So I do think they peak when they do it too. So I don't like to go out. It is very heavy. Thank you. Just two more comments. I'm just reading the messages. Mariana, who is also a victim, and another commentary of Araceli: we need to keep working for memory, justice, and to extend the solidarity and support to the survivors and families. I would like to give a closing space for Jovita or Carmen, if you all want to share some words. I want to add my solidarity with all the survivors, victims, plaintiffs from all these facts. I am in solidarity with your family, with your fight. Thank you. Thank you for being strong. Thank you for the motivation and for stay in this fight, for stay here in this fight after all these years. We continue working with the victims in this really hard path that is also a path of dignity and strength.
I would like to give a few last words, just to thank all of the people who are here in this room. And I say thank because you all are accompanying and supporting our struggles. I also want to thank the families that are directly involved in the cases, confronting this perverse system of justice, and they're still persevering. And finally, I'd like to say, in the indigenous peoples, women always plant flowers of all colors. It doesn't matter how terrible things get, women are always cultivating flowers, and those flowers make us happy. And so that's an example of resistance, historical resistance. And we have a lot to learn from that resiliency. And I think that these struggles are carried out with justice, with dignity. And what they wanted in this case was to squash us, to get rid of us, to kill us, make us kill ourselves with liquor and drugs or whatever. But we won't allow them to do that. We're going to continue moving forward, living with dignity, with all of our force, protesting. And so we have to continue doing the right thing. What helps, what adds to the struggle, and what makes people happy. We can't lose our hope despite all of it. Because even when it rains, the next day, the sun comes out. And if we cry one day, the next day we'll be smiling. Thank you so much for those beautiful words. And to reaffirm our solidarity as NISGUA and all of the other organizations that helped to organize this. We want to thank all the people who made this event possible, and those of you all who are seeing us in Facebook or joining with us in Zoom. And I just want to remind you all that we still have a campaign going on. One is a letter that you can sign in solidarity to support the families of the plaintiffs. And there's also a photo campaign. You can write a message that will go directly to the families. We'll have it open a couple more days. And if you haven't been able to participate, yes, we invite you all to participate. And we're so thankful that Carmen, Jovita, and the FAMDEGUA team would be here. So thank you so much. And I hope you will follow us on our social media, NISGUA, FAMDEGUA, and other organizations. That's all we have for you tonight. So we hope you have a wonderful night. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Good night, everyone.